All right. Hey, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. How is your Wednesday going? How has your week been? How are your seahorses and everything else? Grab your glass, join me. I think I've already got a joiner. Did someone just join? No, maybe not.
Yeah. Glad
Oh,
to see what you're up to.
hey, Ray, what's up?
Oh, not a lot. Picked up, I think I told you last week I thought I had shingles. Well, it
Oh,
turns out I went to the doctor the next day and I do have shingles. And it's
oh,
only gotten worse since then.
oh no.
It's
And
a very painful thing to have, but the thing is I've lived with pain, so it's not that it's a lot different. It's just that it's hard to live with where it is around the waist. I can't wear a belt or anything.
oh gosh.
But just another part of life.
Yes, I suppose. I suppose you're right. Still, that sucks. I'm so sorry to hear that. Um, I mean, it's treatable, right? I mean, you're fixing it up, right?
Yeah, I got 2 more doses of medicine left, but it's the kind of thing that can be with you for a long time. It's a disease of the elderly normally,
Ah,
and I guess you can consider me in that category. And I've heard that some people get through it in a couple of weeks, but I can't seem to find anybody that got through it that fast. The normal average time appears to be more like 5 weeks, but then there's a good number of the people that once it heals up, you still live with the pain because it's a nerve damage. It's not just a pain that's caused from like the damage on the skin and that.
gotcha. Wow.
And so I don't know. I've got enough nerve damage already. I don't need any more.
Oh gosh, I hear you. Well, darn it, Ray. 2020 is supposed to be the year of all good stuff for us seahorse people. So we need to nip
Doesn't
this
work
in the
out that
bud.
way. And now that seahorse that we were talking about last week, I'm force feeding her because she won't eat on her own anymore.
Really.
Now,
Okay, now refresh my memory here. What was
Astorina,
That's right. Okay, right. Last week we discussed at length the Asterina star, little stars that crawl right up on the seahorses. I'm curious. I did see Holly and Susan. Hello, guys. Curious what your experiences are with that kind of situation. But Ray, so you're saying it just kind of went from bad to worse, right? You were treating, right?
yeah, I was treating her, and I don't know whether it's like it's only been a week, and I think it's more my wishful thinking. But I kind of think that it appears to be better.
Mm,
But when I stop and think about it, it's been a long time since I've had a diseased seahorse.
right.
But if I'm honest about it, I don't think in a week's time that I was really seeing a big improvement in them before. But so I think it's more wishful thinking at the moment. But
Hmm.
when she stopped eating, and I went for a couple of days, like the live shrimp don't interest her at all. I even went out, got some live ghost shrimp and tried that, but no go there either.
Oh my
So I'm tube
gosh.
feed just twice a day, once in the morning and once after supper, and hoping that it'll heal up and then she'll get back to eating again. But
Gosh.
I've still got her in the hospital tank and still
Well,
treating her with the meds.
I'll tell you, Ray, a lot of people are very fearful of tube feeding or force feeding. I personally am myself. I've always been fearful of that because it's just, I guess my biggest question to you regarding that is how do you know, how do you determine how much food the seahorse is actually getting?
Well, because I can see it going in.
Okay.
Like you put the tube past the gills so that it doesn't come out the gills. That's a
Okay.
big mistake a lot of people did. Like my experience for this comes back over a decade, well over a decade ago, in my early days when I had a lot more problems. And while I haven't had to do it for a long time now, it's still something you know how to do. Uh, you fumble around the first time you're doing it again, but it comes back.
Sure.
And you get it in past the gills, and then you watch because sometimes when they jerking around, the needle comes out a little bit, and well, I don't. It's not a needle; it's cannula, and sometimes it pulls back a bit, and it does go out the gills. So you look at the, um, you know how much you had in the syringe to begin with, and then when some comes out, you look to see uh, what the mark is at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and you get a pretty good estimate if something has come out. Like I, the first time I fed her, I had that problem, but since then, I've been able to hold on to her so that the cannula hasn't retracted, so I know what goes in is getting in. So I give her each feeding, she's getting almost a half cc at a time, or half a milliliter at a time.
Mm.
And the gruel that I make up is I make paste out of frozen mysis, and then I sort of double the volume up using spirulina powder and Algamac 3050,
Mm.
and uh, make it as thick as I can and still get it out the cannula.
Gotcha.
And so it's worked for me in the past. Now, mind you, I've had failures in the past too, but and I
Well,
don't know. I have no way to know when I'm doing it if I'm going to be successful or not. There's no
sure.
signs that I've been able to detect that can tell me.
Sure. I do see the questions, guys. We're gonna chat in just 1 second. I just wanted to touch base with Ray about his six seahorse. And I'm curious for anyone in the audience, have you ever had to tube feed or force feed? Um, it's something I managed to avoid, and it's always frightened me. I have heard from people who have had this experience, had to do it, as Ray has many times. That one of the other things is you can tell by basically the waste. You know, if they're not pooing, then they're probably not getting much food. But um, anyways, everybody has fingers crossed for you, Ray, and yeah, you guys, if you have any questions, thoughts, or anything you want to ask or say, please feel free to pipe up. Um, let me see. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it, Ray, at all?
Oh no,
Okay,
I knew you would want an update. If you thought about it, you
absolutely.
probably asked. I figured, well, I'll hit you right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it because I mean that's what we're here for, guys. We can't always fix it, and Ray's actually one of the pros in my personal opinion. And so sometimes these
Well,
things
it's just
just
some
happen.
more experience than others. That's all.
Sure. But I'm just saying, I just really hope this is successful for you. Are you also still medicating or no?
Yes.
Okay. And what are you using?
I can't trust it to have, when you get through the first treatment, when you don't see obvious signs,
Mm,
then I think it's foolhardy to quit and give it a chance to get a hold again if the treatment is doing something. Uh, it's stupid to let it get a hold and come back again. So I go through the second treatment, and then usually by the end of the second treatment, I'll get some kind of an idea.
mm-hmm,
And I have, a long time ago, long time ago, gone 3 treatments of Furan,
mm-hmm.
but that's the most I've ever done. And that one, in that case, I lost the seahorse anyway.
Oh no. See, I've
But
I've actually used Furantu or Furan, however you want to pronounce it. Also, I usually use it with triple sulfa, but especially
yeah,
with.
I use triple sulfa too.
Sure. Well, I agree with your statement because, I've just heard so many horror stories of someone, starting a treatment and either changing and using a different medication or stopping the treatment. And then, as you said, it comes back even worse. and then you can't fix it. So I personally have always, completed the treatment process, and I've had a lot of success with those two mixtures. So, anyways, I'm just crossing fingers for you, Ray, and please definitely keep updating us because we do care and want to know how it goes.
I
Um,
will.
yeah. And guys, anybody in the audience, if you're having seahorse issues, I'm actually going to go. I did see the comment where you messaged a few days ago. I apologize for not getting right back to you. It was, I think, Jordan, sorry. I'm going to read, if it's okay. If it's not okay, pipe up real quick. But I was going to read some of the messages and comments that we've gotten recently and kind of discuss. But if anybody out there has anything you want to talk about, Susan, if you want to plug any seahorses for sale, or guys, anything you want to talk about, please just comment away because it's Wine Wednesday. We just chit chat, whatever you guys want to chat about. And Susan said, scares me too. You've never had to force feed. Yeah. Yeah. It is scary. I can't even imagine. So I think it's amazing when people like Ray do go to these lengths, but I'd be so
It was
afraid I'd hurt them. Actually,
when I did it.
actually, really quick, last question, Ray, about that. How do you know if how can you tell if you're hurting the seahorse? As you described, you have to go past the gills, and isn't it past the trigger and
Well,
etc.
first off, I could, when I used to do it at first,
Hmm.
I used to mark little lines on the cannula.
Okay.
So basically, I would line up before I put it in. I'd line it up from the snout along the snout and up past the gills to see how long it had to go because each seahorse is a little bit different. Some it's a little bit further to go, especially if you got an older one.
Mm,
And so you put a line on the cannula by um, just by holding on the outside first. Then when you insert the cannula, you know you've got to get it just past that line
mm,
to be able to have it in, and it's not easy.
I bet.
It takes moving around, and I can remember, oh, well, it's got to be 15 years at least now because it was a couple of years into my hobby when I first started trying it, and I used to use clove oil to sedate the seahorses a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've quit doing that because I think the sedation sometimes um, makes it more difficult for them to recover.
Ah,
So if anybody is doing it for the first time, though, I'd probably recommend if they can't get it in to that point, then do some mild sedation first. They don't have to be totally uh, sedated, but you have to have them so they're not really thrashing and wiggling around because it is hard.
sure. I think it's, I just think it's really cool that that you have had successes with it, because, oh, it's so
Well, I've had
scary to
some
me.
earlier. If you don't try, you don't know.
Right. I mean, that's true. I've always been lucky enough that, when my seahorses were sick, even if they stopped eating, as you mentioned, the first thing you tried was live feeds, enriched live feeds, and I've just been lucky enough that that's always worked for me. But um, I can't even imagine. I would do it for certain. You have to, when you get into that situation. I just, hats off to you because scary. Okay, really quickly, and guys, again, if you have anything you wanted to share or talk about or any discussion for today, pipe up, feel free. But I did want to read some of the messages we've gotten recently because I do know, guys, sometimes we miss them. So we're definitely not ignoring you. And if we can all help, we will. All right, so Jordan said that he has one Cuda seahorse in his tank. He had a pair, but one died. The seahorse shares a tank with two clowns, small ones, and a firefish. All the animals get food, a fair amount of it too. My seahorse went very shy and depressed looking after the one that died, but now is swimming about all day. I have a few branching corals and lots of live rock for it to heap on. Wait, wait. lots of live rock for it to heap onto, but it seems to swim and swim all day and night. It looks happy, but I was wondering if this is normal. I have a small power head. I'm not going to read all the details. Sorry, I'm not trying to tell your whole business here, but I think the question basically is, um, if I'm reading this properly, it says I have a small powerhead, SW10 powerhead, and have it halfway up. After watching your videos and seeing how your seahorses love a bit of flow, it was actually just after I turned the waves up and return pump more that the seahorse started to come out. And so I'm guessing that the question is whether or not it's normal for the seahorses to swim around a lot and swim around all day. Let me know if that was the basis of the question. And Ray, do you want to take it first? Do you think seahorses are
Well, first off, it's hard for me to give a decent answer on that because you'd never see me have clowns in with seahorses.
right?
While it may work out occasionally, most times it isn't going to work.
Sure,
And it's possible, I'm only saying possible, that the one that died, the immune system in that one wasn't as strong as the one that it has now. And the stress from being around those clowns
hmm,
uh, allowed the parasites or the bacteria to take over and end up with its demise.
sure,
It's also possible that the seahorse now that is swimming around all the time now, to me, that's not normal. They go through periods where they do, periods where they don't. But if it's doing all the time, it may be that's just showing signs of a stress again due to the clowns.
hmm,
Now, I can't answer that and say that that is in fact what is going on. I can
sure.
only throw it out there as possibles.
Well, I'll let you know we're at a difference of opinion here, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I couldn't agree more. If someone asks me as they're setting up a tank whether or not they should put like clownfish and etc. into the tank with seahorses, my advice is always no. Because but I'm more focused on the aggressive eating at this point. Clowns can be aggressive, but sometimes they're not. So it's kind of a 50-50 kind of thing there. And with clowns being captive bred now so heavily, like most of the clowns you get on the market these days are not coming from the wild. So I just think we're in a better situation to mix them. However, their aggressive eating is what scares me because when they eat up all the food, the seahorses don't get as much food. And Ray, you're not wrong. I'm not at all saying that. I'm just giving my opinion. That the aggressive eating is what I worry about. But it seems like in this situation, Jordan, you've already got a situation that was kind of working. Something happened with the first CUDA. um, Obviously, that's not exactly what you were asking, so we won't go into that detail. But it's interesting to me that when you turned the flow up and adjusted the flow, turned up the pump, that the seahorse got more active. I saw the exact same thing in my tanks. When I had extremely low flow, when I first started, the seahorses like barely moved. They were just stationary constantly. They only came out to eat. It was really, it wasn't very much fun and probably not much fun for them. And once I got the flow going, man, these guys are twirling and, you know, swimming right into the flow. Well, we've talked about it extensively many times, but my personal opinion is that when seahorses are stressed out, in my experience, everybody's different, but in my experience, when seahorses are stressed, they go hide in a corner. They turn dark. They don't move around much. They, don't come out to eat as quickly. They kind of, mope. It's the best way I can describe it. But I personally think, especially if you think the seahorse is looking happy and doing well, that it's probably enjoying the flow. Definitely, as Ray pointed out, watch to see if it's getting enough food, if it's being picked on or stressed out by the clownfish. But if you've got some passive clowns, I'd still, watch, of course. But yeah, I personally think that yeah, it's probably enjoying the flow. Guys in the audience, what do you think? Um, do you think that active seahorses are stressed or happy? What do you guys think? And let me actually jump over to comments. Sorry, guys, if you've been talking, I've been missing them. Okay. So yeah, there's two completely different opinions for you, but I just know that I experienced the same thing, and I know that you just lost one of them, and that gives Ray's comments quite a bit of credence, but I just experienced the exact same thing with the seahorses getting more active, happier once I turned the flow up. So I don't know. Ray, do you think that seahorses just typically should just hang out? I mean, do yours
Um,
like dance
it's
and flow
like
and
people have different personalities, and
sure,
you
sure,
find you find some are more outgoing than others, and usually I think almost all species, the female is more outgoing than what the male is. And then again, if they're producing as well, then the male's going to be very reclusive. Um, but there is no ironclad thing that I can say that the seahorses should be
sure.
performing a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if when I have a tank with a lot of them in instead of just a couple,
Right.
you can see quite a wide range of activity from various ones that are in there.
Sure.
Some of them in my ab tank, for instance, I got one that you hardly ever see.
Mm.
It's a male that just does not want to come out until you feed.
Huh.
But um, with the barbs here, um, I guess there's only one that is a lot like that, but not to the same extent that that ab is.
Sure.
And the others, there's a female that is just out all the time, and she just roams. Might roam for half an hour, and then she'll settle in for a while, and then start roaming around again.
Sure.
And just in between that, some of them don't move a lot until you feed. Then they're the fastest movers going for the food.
Oh yeah, and you made a good point about first of all, each seahorse period has a different personality, and then
Yeah.
once you jump on different species, and in fact, there's a question about species. Sorry, guys, just to let you guys know, I've been up since 7 a.m., so I'm a little slower on the draw today. Okay, jump me back into the conversation, please. But, anyways, different species obviously also have very different quirks, personalities. Erectus, or like I've typically kept Erectus. I have kept Redi, Cuda, excuse me, Barbori, excuse me, but um, the Erectus especially are just flow dancers for sure. But let me know if that did answer your question, and I will message you back on the side. Sorry that I didn't get back to you yet, but let me know if that kind of gave you an idea from two very different opinions. And I would love to see your seahorses if you ever want to jump in and show us, or I'm sorry, your seahorse. And if you ever want to, send me pictures, well, I'll message you. Anyhow, and speaking of species, Patricia Miller asked, would Cuda or Reedeye be okay in the same tank as Tiger Tails? Holly, I did see you already answered, but Ray, I wanted to give you a shot. Do you think those three species mix well?
Well, there have been people that have succeeded in mixing the species.
Mm-hmm.
By and large, over my 17, 18 years now, from reading from the posts, now mind you, there's all sorts of people that never ever go on social media. They don't go on things like seahorse.org and so
Sure,
on. Don't come on Wine Wednesday. So there's a lot of people we don't have any access to.
sure,
But for those people that do post on seahorse.org, Reef Central, or Reefs to Go, um, I would say most of the experiences have not succeeded, or
gotcha.
if they may have partially succeeded with some, um, maybe the one species surviving, another one being lost. My personal experience when I first started in 2002. I mixed two species and I lost them all.
Ooh, so
Now,
rough.
that doesn't mean it was because I mixed the two species, because the two of them actually were from the same breeding
Mm,
source in Australia, but it may have been because of my lack of knowledge at the time.
sure.
Uh, the only thing I tried mixing after that, years later, I tried mixing pipefish with seahorses,
Mm,
and again, I lost them all.
right.
And by the time I had a better idea of what seahorses needed, I wasn't to the level I'm at now, but I felt that I should have been able to succeed.
Sure.
And uh, I think there's still something to the fact that if you get captive bred from the same breeder, um, then the different species still will have been brought up in the same waters and should have the same um, immune or partial immunity to the pathogens in that system. So that if you put them together, they're not going to catch something that they haven't been exposed to already. And I think that's part of the battle there in mixing the species.
Well, hopefully Dan will
You
jump
know,
in because I know he's given me a few different recommendations, and I know that his personal opinion is that certain species, I don't want to speak for him, but certain species just tend to be okay to mix and certain are not. And you bring up a good topic, and I'm curious what you guys in the comment section think because do you think it comes down to genetics and just what they need and the different temperatures they're used to, like they've been brought up in, even if they particularly weren't raised there. Do you think that their just species needs certain environment that's different than another species, or do you think that if they're all raised at the same place that they should be able to be mixed? I'm curious what you guys think. My personal opinion, I would have to personally agree with Holly, but I'm a chicken, guys. You guys already know that. I don't mix seahorses. The most I've ever, I have put um, hybrids with Erectus, and I've put Reedi with Erectus, and I was successful in those few situations. But Cuda and especially Tiger Tails, I know are two that just I wouldn't. And I wish Cheryl was here. I need to check and see if she's jumped in on Facebook. But Cheryl is my tiger tail expert, in addition to many other species. And I do believe that she said many times not to mix them with others. So yeah, you could always chance it if you want, but I would not suggest it. What, Ray?
the other thing to think about, maybe it isn't the species, maybe it's the individual seahorse. Again, with the thought that some are more resistant than others, just like we are. I've got kids that seem to be always sick, and I've got other kids that never get sick.
Right. This is true. You're right.
And this, well, put that into grandkids. I keep slipping up there, the grandkids. But uh, oh, in actual fact, one daughter seems to be always sick, but then she's a school teacher, and
Oh,
that's to be
round kids. Yeah, she's done. She's done for poor thing. What does she teach? Just out of curiosity.
well. She teaches French immersion in public school.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay. All right.
But with the different species,
I'm sorry, Ray. Go ahead.
so somebody else was talking there.
No, I was checking the Facebook comments and we heard
Oh,
you talking. Sorry. Go ahead.
okay. I lost my train of thought now, but it has something to do with the
Species.
speech. Oh, the CUDA. I don't know what it's like down in the States. In here in Canada, CUDA is a bad name to have on a seahorse.
Really?
I personally have seen three different seahorses called CUDA,
Oh, right.
and
Because of
I
the
have
CUDA complex, right?
I've seen Reedi listed as CUDA. Um, and some of it comes from the fact that offshore shipments come over, and some people, for some reason, find it easier just to slap CUDA on the designation and then ship them because whoever's checking doesn't know. But they get it over with, and it makes shipping easier just to list them as CUDA for some reason. Now, whether that still applies or not, I don't know because that is some years ago too. But here in Canada, um, it still is the case that there are different looking seahorses,
Mhm.
all called CUDA, and even different size.
Sure. I
Probably
mean,
the
go
biggest
ahead.
seahorse I saw before I got my abs was a CUDA.
Right.
Uh, and yet I've seen some, I actually had one that was probably only 5.5 inches,
Mm,
um, tail to tip of snout.
wow.
So there's quite a difference.
Sure. And I was curious, again, anyone watching, I, I personally thought that that kind of situation had really been resolved. Like I just haven't heard or seen that as much anymore. I know it was a huge issue in the past, but when I go to pet stores now, well, first of all, the second that I talk to any pet store, any good pet store there, and they find out that I'm the Seahorse Whisperer, they ask me if I'm still breeding and want to buy the captive bred seahorses. So they're very interested in acquiring captive bred, and I just haven't seen a lot of the no name seahorse labels. It used to be that way. I remember walking into a store and seeing seahorse for sale or everything being a CUDA, but it just seems to have gotten better. What do you guys think? Have you noticed that? Um, what do you think? I thought I just saw it. And Sir Dan has joined. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm still here.
Well, that is a fantastic thing to learn. Well, actually, no. I wish you were sailing away. But in the meantime, I'm glad you're here. How are you? Anything new?
I couldn't get the damn iPad to connect.
Oh,
Got
well,
that failure to some type of error again. It's like
really?
every other time.
Huh. I'm not really sure. Well, you know, I I don't want to keep saying it, but hopefully soon I'll have that site done, and then we won't need Hangouts. It'll be great. But I apologize that it was difficult for you.
You don't have to apologize. I'm just stating the fact.
Sure. We were actually really quickly. I wanted to know, Holly, did you get your seahorses? Dan, are the seahorses called petite, miniature, or dwarf? Erectus.
I call them minis and dwarfs. I don't care.
Okay.
I don't have a specific name for them.
Except for you don't use the word petite that I liked. Right, gotcha.
Yeah,
You
they're
guys.
littlands.
I know, I know. But Holly, I'm just curious if you got them. I'm dying to see pictures. I've kind of not been on Facebook, but please let me know if you got them and what you think. And anyways, Dan,
I
what
did
else
ship a bunch out today.
you did?
Yeah, the people will be getting them tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow. Well, then hopefully we'll be flooded with lots of videos and pictures. Awesome, awesome. What else is going on with you, Dan?
All kinds of personal things. But
Hmm.
what are y'all talking about anyway?
Well, we talked about Ray's personal shingles, and then no, and then we were actually talking about. We talked about whether or not seahorses should be active or not. Like if you see a seahorse and they get more active when flow is raised, does that mean they're happier or stressed, in your
I
opinion?
I think happier. I think that
That's
they're more active and more flow. They have to swim harder against it. And if you look historically, when I've looked at tanks that were low flow, I saw less activity than when I had higher flow.
absolute. That's actually exactly what I said. But Ray made some good points too, because the person asking the question has clownfish in the tank, and so Ray was just concerned that maybe it was a stress reaction. But I really think that it was the flow also. And I did see your comment also, just the warning that clownfish do get more aggressive as they get older. So again, just be sure to watch because a lot of people are successful with clownfish. I think it depends, my personal opinion, I think it depends on how big the tank is and whether,
Well,
go ahead.
I think there's multiples. I think the
Sure.
tank size does have something to do with it, but I also think it matters on which was introduced first, the
Ooh,
size of the clowns,
sure.
and the individual clowns.
Mm. And the
And
individual seahorses.
also,
I'm sorry, Ray, what?
and the individual seahorses also.
Great minds. Gotcha. Um, yeah, so thank you for that opinion. Thanks. Yeah, I got one right. No, I'm just kidding. We also talked about mixing species, and I'm so glad you did join because the three species that were particularly asked about were tiger tail, reed-eye, and kuda. What is your advice about mixing species, and does it matter which species?
My answer to that is yes, no, and maybe. And the reason for that is that there are people that mix them successfully.
Mm,
There's also many people that mix them and lose some or all.
mm,
Um, there's no predictability in it. We don't know the exact problem. There's been no studies or any science. The theory is that they all have different type of gut bacteria, and one of the species will carry something the others just aren't used to, and the pathological gene they contract it, the pathological gene gets turned on, and then you have problems.
sure.
So, my experience has been you can mix erectus and reedi generally without problems.
Mhm.
Um, Generally, if you mix erectus with any of those three, I mean, that with the reedi, no problem, but the other two,
Mm,
we don't know the statistics, but we see a lot of people have issues when they do it. And
sure.
tiger tails, I would keep as species specific tank. I wouldn't mix those with anybody else.
Yes, that's why I didn't want to speak for Cheryl, but I really remember her saying that multiple times. So that specific species just seems to be one that, I mean, that was another question, Dan, just out of curiosity, because Ray made a great point, saying that one of the things that matters is whether or not all the seahorses come from the same breeder.
I don't think it
Meaning,
matters.
you don't think it matters. Okay.
No. My wife had a thought that she believed to be true, um, that I didn't necessarily agree with, but at the same time, I'm not going to say it's not the case.
Mhm.
Her feelings was if you mix seahorses that are found in the same areas in the wild, in other words, their territories overlap,
Right.
such as reedi and erectus, then you're probably going to have a higher success rate than taking something from the Atlantic and mixing with something from the Pacific, for example.
See, I'll actually say I was kind of hinting at that earlier in my comment, and Abby, I always agree with Abby. She's amazing. Um, but why do you think that? Why did she think that that was? Do you have any idea or any thoughts on that?
Well, it was from her experience in talking with customers
Mm,
that she somehow got that opinion. And, you know, usually when I talk to people, it's people when she was handling the sales, when I talk to people, it was because there was a problem. But she talked to people all day long.
mm,
And, she just gathered that opinion over a period of time. And um, we've never tried to test that theory because we didn't want to lose specimens testing.
right.
I
But
agree with her.
it makes sense because in theory, you would think that the waters would contain the same stuff. Um, I don't know if it's true or not. But if I was going to venture a guess at if I was going to try it, I would, try to mix from the same overlapping areas.
Sure.
But my advice to people when they want to mix species is you have to assess your own risk tolerance level. And are you willing to take the risk of losing one or more specimens because you're mixing? If you can handle that with no problem, then mix. If you can't bear the thought of losing a seahorse, don't.
Sure. And yeah, the thought that has always come to my mind thinking about that is the temperature. Because, and just to give a really, big example, um, if you get the abdominalis. It doesn't matter if they're wild from a breeder, from the same breeder, it doesn't matter. They still need that lower temperature, even if they were captive bred in a breeding facility. And I do understand that the breeder's keeping them at a lower temperature also, but if they don't, it doesn't work out well. And that's
Well,
just no matter
I've no,
what, you know?
yeah, but I've seen issues even at lower temperatures. And
Oh no,
interestingly enough, I've seen people mix erectus and abdominalis together. I've had 5 customers do it successfully.
were they keeping them at a low temperature or no?
Yeah, they were in the mid to upper 60s, around 66, 67 degrees.
So they kind of catered to the abdominalis.
Well, the abdominalis, in my experience, at least the ones that I had, um, you didn't want to get them above 68, and you
Mm,
ideally you wanted to keep them at 67 or lower.
gotcha.
And if you got them up around 69, they started becoming lethargic.
Gotcha. Well, that's I guess that's very broadly that's kind of what I was just thinking is just that certain species kind of just have these needs that can't be overcome no matter what. Um, but whatever. Anyhow, um, not to jump around, guys, but I don't want to forget anything. Nicole, I did see you say hello. So glad you came tonight. And I wanted to read really quickly because I think it was last week that we talked also, maybe the week before, that we talked about how using dead shrimp to cycle an aquarium isn't technically the best way to do things anymore, and using the ammonia testing. I don't have a name for it. Dan, correct me if you want to, but using ammonia to actually cycle and test the tank and make sure it's fully cycled. We talked about that a few weeks ago, and she just messaged to say, just had to let you know, thank you so much for that advice. You were 100% correct that the dead shrimp method was completely unpredictable. She changed the shrimp every 3 days for probably 9 days or so. It spiked the ammonia and subsequently the nitrate. I'm sorry, I think she meant nitrite, but now I'm almost 4 weeks in and every number stopped moving. Ammonia is between 1 to 2 ppm. I won't read her whole message, but the bottom line is she said, thank you so much for the great advice. So, thank you for the comment, Nicole, because we love that these talks help. Sometimes I feel like we just get in here and I get to drink wine and hang out with my buddies, but I love it when it helps people. So, thank you for the comment. Um, all right, that was it. I just wanted to read that. So, okay, what else is going on, guys? Or what else have you seen lately? Ray, do you keep up with Seahorse.org still? Did Ray go away?
Calling Ray.
I think Ray. Oh, Ray's on mute. Look at me talking to a ghost. All right, Dan, do you keep up with Seahorse.org? What a silly question.
No,
Right, you're busy, crazy, can't keep up with much, right?
no, I don't keep up with them. Unfortunately, unfortunately, there's nothing there to keep up with it much of anymore.
Right. I just wondered if there was any new stuff coming out, but okay. So, anyways, any interesting topics in Seahorse Sources group lately, or
Um, I don't know. I answered a question. Um, somebody Lisa Liu had posted about
mm.
how do you clean up a tank that's been a sick tank.
Ooh,
Um, Essentially, the question was if you've got a seahorse that's being treated for parasites and you're treating the seahorse in a hospital tank, what do you do about the tank itself if the tank is full of parasites? And philosophically speaking, I think of it doesn't matter whether it's parasites or bacteria, I handle them the same way.
which is what?
Well, you have to clean up the tank. And essentially, usually in these cases, I'm usually dealing with somebody one on one and walking them through different aspects. And usually, if you've got a single seahorse that's sick and all the rest are doing fine, then I'm going to assume that the tank, the tank doesn't need to be a major overhaul. On the other hand, when you have multiple animals that are showing the same symptoms, like in other words, you got 6 seahorses in a tank and you got 5 of them that have suddenly developed weak SNP,
Mm,
then you probably got something going on in the tank. Or if you've got multiple bacterial infections going on, and you know, what I usually recommend to the customer do is first move all the seahorses to a hospital tank. And if it's an epizootic type episode, then we want to go ahead and move them all, whether they're showing symptoms or not, and treat everybody the same. And then while the tank is technically fallow from seahorses, you then have to determine what's left in the tank. And in most cases, people are going to have inverts. They're going to have, some people have corals or other tank mates, whether they be fish or, inverts or whatever. And the easiest way to do this is to first change all your filter media. Um,
mm,
Anything that can filter, whether it's a sock, filter sock, or whether it's a cartridge, or you want all those to be clean. You want to scrub the tank as well as you can, every surface that you can possibly scrub and knock the biofilms off. And then, if possible, you want to up the flow in the tank so that everything stays suspended so the filters can remove it. And then go ahead and do as large of a water change as you physically can do, tip ideally somewhere around 80%.
mm.
And then after that, then usually I put the people on a regimen where they're dosing the tank with peroxide and 12 hours later dosing it with probiotics. And usually we double up on the probiotics the first 2, 3 to 5 days and then drop back to normal dosing. And the peroxide dosing is done at 1 part per million. And the peroxide dosing is, the idea behind it is to try to oxidize excess organics. And the whole object of this is to remove all the suspended and dissolved organics out of the tank, which is essentially the food source for the bad guys.
Okay, that makes sense.
And typically, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks of doing this. And then at the end, we do, before we move the seahorses back, we do another very large water change and test it, make sure everything is fine, and then move the animals back in.
So just to be sure I'm getting this, basically you're saying when it comes to bacteria, um, the probiotics, the good guys fight out the bad over this time period in recouping it. If it was a parasitical thing, then by doing the large water changes and changing the filter media, you're kind of wiping out anything that's in there, and hopefully there's the hosting thing is not going on anymore. And then just in general, by lowering the organics, you're going to have better health all around and etc. Is that basically the
Well, the
summary?
organics are a food source for both the bacteria and the
Right,
ciliates.
right.
So the water change, by itself is not enough. And scrubbing it by itself, none of these things by themselves are enough when you've got a sick tank.
Mm-hmm.
And a good example is somebody who's dealing with a urinema type ciliate,
Right.
where it gets rampant, and it you really have to do a major cleanup. In a perfect world, and like in our situation, we would just switch them to another tank because it's not a big deal. We can move everything to another tank, bleach the tank, and start over. Most people can't do that with a display tank. So, when I came up with this system of doing this, which was several years ago, I had several people who didn't want to tear down their tank, and that's why we came up with this protocol. And it's worked every time that I've done it.
Okay,
Now,
go
there
ahead.
is one instance where it may not work. Well, that is, you got to make sure the animals are clean before you reintroduce them back into the tank.
That's what I was
And
just gonna ask. Go ahead.
so, if we're dealing with something that's suspected like a Vibrio or urinema or something of that nature, generally speaking, you can clean them up and put them back without problem. If it's a suspected mycobacteria issue or an acid fast bacteria type thing, such as nocardia or something like that, then the results generally, it boils down to the animals themselves, and you can't really cure acid fast bacteria in seahorses. So you can make them become asymptomatic. You can get their treat the bacteria and get the immune system up to where the symptoms go away, but it's still present in the seahorse. So the least little stressor is gonna rear its ugly head again.
Mm.
And usually in that instance, what I recommend to people, if the seahorses respond to treatment, then we just don't add anything new to the system. Let the seahorses live out their lives, and then start over when they're gone.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, it really does get confusing. You know, you think about life cycles, you know, if you're talking parasites, when you're talking bacteria, there's so many. And as you were kind of saying, you know, most of the time, you're not going to really clear a tank of some of these things. They're omnipresent, you know? So
Well, they
it,
are, but the other thing is what are we dealing with? And in most cases, what's different about seahorses than some of the other reef fish is that, generally speaking, you're not dealing with ick and some of the
right.
parasites they get. Um, it's usually ciliates, which you're not fighting, a long life cycle of eggs and everything else. With the ciliates, if you remove the food source, their population drops.
I'm so sorry. You said with the ciliates, you remove the food source and the population drops, right? But I mean, is that basically the main parasite type thing that when you're dealing with seahorses? I mean, that's they don't get the other stuff, so that's it, right?
Well, there's a few others that come into play, but uh, I would say the most common one is urinema or urinema like ciliates.
Hmm.
There's a whole group of them, which I can't even pronounce the name of the damn thing, but it's called scutoscoliosis or something like that. Um, it's a long name that I don't want to pronounce.
I am so sorry, you guys. Girls, shh, bang on the wall. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, sorry. Sorry if everybody heard that. 12-year-olds think they're 20 and they're. All right, anyhow, no, I mean, really interesting topic because that is a difficult thing, you know, how to move
Yeah.
back into fixing it. You know, when even if you cure the seahorse, I've personally done the same things where if I've got a seahorse in a hospital tank or seahorses in a hospital tank and I, you know, cure them, whatever, I fix the problem, then I've been known to just start up a new tank just because it's such craziness. So your method is really interesting and good, and especially since it's worked so many times.
Well, generally speaking, like I said, the real thing to this is what is the ailment, and
Sure.
make sure the animals are cleaned up properly before entering them back in. And the peroxide, one has to be careful because if you overdose it with peroxide, you will wipe out your beneficial bacteria. So when I'm talking to people, I'll calculate out the dosing for that for them. Um, and it should be about 1 part per million. If you're doing it on a daily basis, your nitrobacter won't take a hit. If you
Mm,
get up around 2 to 3 parts per million on a daily basis, after a few days, you'll start seeing the nitrobacter take a hit and your nitrites will start going up. Um, you could, on a one-time dose, you can dose it up to 10 parts per million, but um, that's not as effective as daily microdosing. It just
sure.
seems to work better.
Sure. And that, I mean, heck, I use it. I use it in my reef too, for different reasons, but amazing stuff. Have you noticed, on with your customer base and anybody watching, have you guys noticed that when you do use the probiotics, you just tend to have way fewer problems? Like, is that a good way to like avoid some of the problems so that you don't have to go through it, treat and clean up?
Well, the problem that most people have with using probiotics is measuring the effectiveness of it.
Yeah.
And if everything is going good, people say, well, it's not doing
Right.
anything. Well, that's because, it is.
It is.
And just because you're using it doesn't mean you can't have a problem. But the primary thing that the probiotics do is the first thing they do is they go in and eat up organics. So you're
Hmm.
putting in good bacteria to eat the stuff that the bad bacteria wants to eat.
Right.
And
Outcompete them.
right, it's competitive exclusion that they call it.
I
And
like
then
outcompete, but go ahead.
and
Sorry.
then sometimes, some bacteria will emit an enzyme that affects the other bacteria. So sometimes that comes into play.
Mm,
Um, it depends upon which probiotics you're using and which bacteria species they're using.
gotcha.
Um,
So, how many people in the comments do use the probiotics? And what do you use? I like, it's Mike F. Is that what it's called, Dan?
Sanolife, Mike F.
Yes, that's from Seahorse Source. That's the one that I've used and have had extreme success with, and um, have used it to clean up tanks. Not after the situation he's talking about that Holly asked about, where it's a sickness, but definitely have used it to clean up tanks for sure. So how many of you guys use it, or what do you guys do? What do you think? Um, I didn't notice the question, and Ray, I saw you answered it, but we'll just say it out loud. What is a good temperature for seahorses? Does it depend on the species, or
Yes.
okay? Go ahead,
My,
Ray.
my abs the same temperature that I keep my barbs.
That's interesting. So you keep your barbs at the same temperature as abs, really?
No, I says I can't.
Oh, I was like, "Ooh, that may have been what I was doing wrong." Whoops. Okay, sorry.
You,
Go on.
what temperature do you keep the barbs, Ray?
73, 74.
Hmm.
And you said you can't keep the others at the same temperature as the barbs?
I can't keep the abs at that temperature,
Oh, okay.
and I can't keep the barbs at 64 to 68.
Yeah. I've kept them at 68 with no problem.
Well, see, I can't keep them in the same area because I use an air conditioner to keep the abs temperature down in the summertime. But then
Gotcha.
in the wintertime, the area sits at 64. And so if I had the abs down there, I would have to heat the tank.
Yep.
Well,
Actually,
go ahead.
I actually have a heater in the abs tank anyway because um, my temperature at nighttime here goes down to 15 Celsius. And I can't remember what that is just offhand, but it's too cool for them. So there's about 12 hours a day where it the temperature drops
Hmm.
down to 15, and then a short period of time where it comes up. Um, and so the tank was getting down under the 68 at nighttime, and so I stuck a heater in just for that control. But I need the cooler temperatures just for my own purposes. First of all, to sleep, and then in the mornings I do treadmill. So I do 7.3 kilometers every morning on the treadmill, and if I do that at normal room temperatures, it's a killer for me in my shape. So at 15 degrees, it's a lot easier for me. I turn the fan on as well and do the work. So that's the temperature. The house temperature is for my convenience. So sometimes I have to compensate for the seahorses in order to accommodate for them.
Well, sorry, I got caught. I was trying to comment on Facebook. Sorry, guys. But yeah, no, I would agree with your overall statement as far as temperature. Um, Dan, did you have anything to add to that at all?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. Well, I mentioned before you jumped in, Dan, that I know you had made the comment that you were had all sorts of personal stuff going on. I have been up. Actually, I didn't even sleep last night, so I'm like exhausted. So I probably won't keep this going much longer today. So if there is anything that you want to share, Dan, going on with anything, please jump in. Or guys, if you have any questions or comments that have to be covered this week, ask him now because I can see myself looking sleepy and I don't want to do that. Are you drinking on anything tonight? Oh, sorry, Ray, go ahead.
I could use an early night too. I need to get some ice packs on the shingles.
Oh, yes. Yes. We want to hear, well, we want to hear how things go with the seahorse. We're all crossing fingers, Ray. And of course, for you also. Hey, Dan, have you ever had to um, force feed such a not nice way to put it? What is the correct proper term, Ray? Um,
Feed or tube feed doesn't
tube
matter.
feed. Have you ever had to do that for a seahorse, Dan?
I've done it. I haven't had done it very often, but I've done it, and I've instructed many people to do it.
Really? Is it typically Ray's had lots of success, but Ray's Ray. Have
No,
you
I've had lots of failures too, so I'm
right?
just guessing. I'm probably not much better than 50-50.
Ah, what do you think the ratio is for the customers you've helped, Dan?
Well, I don't think of the tube feeding was the make or break it. I think the underlying issue is the problem.
Mm, makes sense. Makes sense.
For me, the tube feeding is just to get them to the point where they can get healthy enough to start wanting to do things for themselves.
Agreed.
Why?
The first probably in 10 years that I've had to do.
This is like just a silly question because obviously seahorses don't have the brains that humans do and such. But why do they just stop eating? I mean, I understand when it's like a situation like weak snick or whatnot where they literally can't, but why do they just stop eating when they're stressed or when they're sick? I don't
I think it's just like with people. If you get sick enough, you're not going to want to eat. When my wife had,
shoot. That's when I pig out. Sorry. Go ahead. What?
when my wife had the cancer, the biggest thing they kept telling me all the time was get this
Right.
nutrition into her all the time. But I
I
couldn't get her to take it. She didn't have any interest at all in taking anything.
Right. You're right. I was thinking and talking about just like a basic sickness, but
But
you're
I think
right. When it's
she has
serious,
the same way.
yeah, that makes sense. It really does. It just sucks. I just really hope that you're successful, right? And come share with us for sure. Have you ever tried to like, get a shot or a video of doing it, feeding the seahorse?
Never even thought of it. Well, first of all, I don't have that kind of stuff to be able to do it. I don't have a smartphone, so
I just wondered. I just wondered. Um, Besides, Dan, you said that you recommend, you or not recommend, but you've helped customers and friends walk them through this procedure. But do you actually recommend it to people, or is it? Because I was asking Ray earlier, how do you know that you're not going to hurt them? That's always been my main. Like you have to get it down so far.
Yeah, it's not something that I recommend right off the get go. I'm usually hesitant to do that.
Sure.
Um, and it really depends, if you've got an animal that all the other symptoms are gone and that's the only issue that remains, then I'm all for doing it. Um, the tube feeding is not designed to really replace regular feeding. It's designed to give them enough nutrition to survive until they can eat on their own.
Sure.
So, um, a lot of it goes back to how comfortable the customer is with it. And, I've got some customers that say, I don't care. I'm just going to, I'll do whatever I have to do. And I got
Mhm.
others that become real squeamish at it. They're probably not a good candidate for tube feeding.
Sure. Yeah,
didn't
makes
Tammy have
sense.
it on her website?
I'm sorry.
Didn't Tammy have a video of tube feeding on her website?
Yeah, and if you go and look at seahorse.org, there's instructions there. They call it force feeding there, but I don't like how Mark did it. Mark used to recommend use anesthetizing the seahorse,
Yeah, that's the way I.
and the problem with that is if you do it wrong, you put the horse down. So most of us have found that it's not necessary to sedate the animal in order to tube feed.
Yeah, I used to when I very first started. I had so much trouble that I used the. Uh, Now it's gone out of my mind here.
You're as
What?
bad as me, Ray. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but I already told you earlier tonight what it was, and I can't remember now.
Oh my.
That's all right. Who am I talking to?
Who are you? I was gonna ask earlier and kind of got sidetracked what you guys were drinking tonight.
That was the cool.
Green tea.
This is like probably at least 15 years ago when I was using the clove oil. But the thing is, it gave me um, the ability to tube feed at the time until I gained enough experience to figure out how to do it without doing the cold boil anymore. And while like when I did it this time, I haven't done it for so many years. The very first time I had trouble. By the time I had it, that first one down again, I was back on the saddle again. So by the time the second one came along, it was easier.
Hmm.
But the cold boil did give me the ability to do it at the start there when I was so bloody scared.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. As long as you know what you're doing. It's just scary to me, but
Well, one way to look at it too, a lot of times if you're at the point where you have to tube feed, uh,
right,
the seahorse is going to go down anyway.
right. Well,
So if you can sedate it and bring it back, then you're ahead of the game.
yep, and I'm just going to continue hoping that your Seahorse comes back around. I just can't believe that that stinking star caused all this trouble. It makes me so angry.
Well, the
Um,
main thing is it was so hard to get out.
now
I've been
does
pulling them out for, I don't know, the better part of a year now. They just keep on coming.
oh I know. I mean, would you even consider one of those Harlequin shrimp or
One of those what?
Harlequin shrimp that eat them?
Oh, no. Well, first of all, you can't find them around here in Canada
Oh,
anyway.
gotcha, gotcha. It's a bummer because I mean, I know I had those. I've dealt with them before. They're never ending. They, break off a little teeny toenail. It seems like, and all of a sudden there's a new starfish, and they have babies like no other. I can't believe it. Um, so I don't know. If you ever figure out how to rid your tank of them, let us know. And
I actually
definitely.
haven't seen any since that one that I got off the Seahorse. And normal for me is between 3 and 5 a week picking out of the tank.
Oh, see, that's not even bad, right? But, uh, anyways, um, well, I'm just hoping that things do work out for you and for her. But, anyhow, anything else, guys, that you want to chit chat about? I
I'm
didn't.
going to go and I'm going to go get some ice.
Okay, you go take care of yourself, Ray. Take care of that
Okay,
seahorse,
sweet.
too.
Good
Yep.
night, all.
Good night, Ray. Dan, did you have anything else that you wanted to share? I feel like I kind of jumped you and started asking you questions before you could even say anything.
I do have a topic I'd like to discuss, but it can wait for another night because it's probably going to be lengthy.
Do you want to start it, or do you want to
I think
maybe?
we should do it next week. Essentially, one of I was contacted this week by someone who is pretty good with seahorses, and they posed a question. Not that they were creating an opinion, but they posed a question for discussion of how ethical or should we or should we not with designer seahorses. And it what brought it up was the dwarf erectus. And
Hmm.
you know and like the clowns, how they make all kinds of different clowns today.
Yep.
And should we or should we not do that with seahorses? And it's one of those questions that I won't say there's a right or a wrong answer, but it's something that is a good discussion topic to get into.
Absolutely. And what I'll do, instead of giving any thoughts or opinions now, you're absolutely right. What I'll do is I'll post that we're going to discuss this next week. So people need to get their opinions ready and bring them back. But
Yeah.
okay, guys. Well, thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you, Dan, for coming and joining us. I know you've got so much on your plate, so when you come, we really appreciate it. Thanks to Ray, who I think already left, and to everybody who comes, comments, enjoys, and especially anyone who benefits from this. I love your comments. Please let us know if you have any questions you want discussed, anything that helps you. Definitely share, because that's what this is about. But okay, well, I'm going to wish you all a happy Wine Wednesday. Dan, would you like to say goodbye, and I'll cut her?
Goodbye.
All right, guys. Happy Wine Wednesday. See you next week. Cheers.